Welcome back to my channel. So today I'm going to explain about software prototyping model in detail and in descriptive manner. So before moving on to that, you can look over here one diagram. So like I said, you can look over the diagram given over here. So in this diagram, you can observe that there are three different modules. One is a customer feedback. Second one is your develop refined prototype, and the third one is testing a prototype by the customer. So your software prototyping model will revolve around this three element. So in this class, we will be discussing how what are the advantages and disadvantages of using a software prototyping model. Obviously, what it is also. Then what are the different types of prototype model in a brief we will be discussing. So now what happened when we refers to software prototype, we talks about what? It is a process of developing a working model of a software application. That means what we are doing over here, we are developing a working model. So it talks about what working model. So working model doesn't necessarily have to be perfect. So the working model can always be in a rough format or in an assumption format, or what we got for input from the client. It could be in that format also. So this basically demonstrate what the core functionality of the system. So what your working model should at the end talks about, that it should only talks about the core functionality. So what are the functionality included in your system talks about your prototyping model. So in this what happened prototype, this may not contain exact internal logic of the final software, but it will be visually and functionally represent how the system will behave in form of a user perspective. So when we think like as a developer or as a software testing background, we have to analyze before moving on to the requirement phase. So what happened when a client gives us a requirement? With the requirement, we need to talk about how its short flow of model will work. So that became our prototyping model. So in this prototyping model, what I said, we have to observe, talk about how the work model should flow, how the work should flow from one module to other. And what happened here, basically we are going to focus on the functionality. So the main purpose of this software prototyping is what? To understand the customer requirements at the early stage of the development. Many time what happen is your customer themselves will not be fully aware of what exactly they want. So prototyping model will bring an idea in between the client and the developer, what interaction are they are going to have, and what actually client mindset is having. So what it used to do is, it used to bridge the gap between the client and the developer by allowing the user to see, analyze, and interact. You can say it also evaluate the preliminary version of the system before the actual software is been built. So the customer, obviously the customer will be from a non-background, non-IT means your non-computer application background or computer science background. In that way, what happened, you have to look over to it, and in that case what happened is, as a user perspective, how it should look like, we have to show a prototype model to them in order to understand this. So now what happened, we can see that this prototype model first talks about what is the customer feedback, then how to develop the particular module, then it moves to the testing of the model, then again it comes back to the customer feedback. So it is a cycle which keeps on repeating itself multiple time. But in what way? So in order to understand that, we move to what? We move to the working of your prototyping model. So this is what working, you can say. So this is a walking of your prototyping model. So the walking of the prototyping model will explain how this interaction works in a more descriptive manner. So prototyping model always follow a interactive cycle. So from the term interactive, we means what? We means repetitive. So like I said, in the previous diagram, you would have seen that while I was explaining about what is prototype model, in that the process keeps on repeating itself in a form of a cycle. So hence it is also regarded as what? Pro- uh, your interactive cycle. You can see in the diagram itself where the customer feedback continuously drive the improvement. So here cycle is always start with what? Developing a prototype, then testing with the customer, then collecting feedback, refining the prototype, and repeating the process until the customer is satisfied. So, in order to do that, we will pass through 5 different stages. Basic stage, what we will discuss. The first stage we can discuss over here is will be a obviously if a client is giving you some criteria, so we need to identify the basic requirements. So, what are the basic requirements? We have to do identification. So that become as what? Our first perspective of our prototyping model. So the first step in the prototyping model is what? Your basic requirement identification. So at this stage, what we are doing? At this stage, the development team focuses only on understanding the basic requirement of the system. So mainly it is related to user interface and user interaction. Okay. So user interface and user interaction. So because client doesn't need to know how the system is working at the back. Client only wants the result, how it is displayed in the form, in the review or the view of a user. So in that perspective, what happened? We have to obviously focus on the user interface and user interaction. So the detailed aspects such as your performance optimization, security mechanism, and also your internal system logic are intentionally ignored in this kind of phase. Because why? Here the customer initially won't ask you for the functionality. They want to know how the interface is going to look. So based on the looks, they are going to provide more data, what should be inputted. So the goal is not about the perfection but about the clarity what the user want. So this helps what? This helps the developer quickly move forward without spending obviously too much time on one complex design decision. Okay, so once it is been done, we move to the next working point. That is what? Once the basic requirement has been identified, then what we are going to do? We are going to develop, right? So develop the initial stage of the prototype, developing initial prototype, right? So once we understood the basic requirement, we are going to move into the initial prototype. So in this case, what we are doing? We are developing it. So here the prototype will present the system screen, your navigation flows and the basic interaction. So internally, your prototype may use a shortcut or temporary logic. All that is also known as your workarounds to stimulate the functionality. But here the intention is to give a customer a look and a feel of what final system, even though the back-end logic may not be complete or accurate, but it just says what? How the system is going to look like. This means what happened in this stage. You transfer any abstract idea into a visual and interactive form, making it easier for the user to express their exception, or you can say what is their expectation at this point. So in that way, what happened? We developed the first initial prototype. So always remember here, like I mentioned, client doesn't necessarily have to know what going on in your backend, because they don't have any relationship with that. They just need the product in their hand. So in that way, what happened? What is visible to their eyes becomes their requirement. So as we have developed the initial prototype, you know that the major thing is what once we develop anything, will after the developing will be your testing. So here what happened, as the prototype is being built for the customer, so the testing of prototype should be done by the customer. The testing of the prototype by the customer, we can say. So in this case, what is happening? In this case, means you can say after the prototype is developed, obviously it is presented to your customer and any kind of key stakeholder for the evaluation. So at this stage, what will happen? Customer will interact with the prototype and test it as if they are using the real system. So they provide any kind of feedback related to the usability or any missing features are there or any confusing screen which they are unable to understand or any change in the workflow of the model. So this is the crucial or you can say most extremely important because it allows the user to identify the requirements. So once a person see, more they see, the more they will analyze it. So the more they can grasp that what they missed or what extra they want to add or what they want to remove from it. So that's what happened. It helps the user to identify your requirement that were not clearly communicated earlier or were completely overlooked during your initial discussion. So now what is happening in this entire prototyping model is we are not doing any hardcore developing job. We are going into a just a model framing where we are doing basic designing in order to satisfy the user and get all the proper input rather than spending our lot of time in this developing a hardcore model and later realizing that this was not the client requirement. So in order to avoid that, we give a basic idea about the to the client what the system is going to be. So now what happened? Obviously, like I keep on mentioning, the major factor is going to be your feedback. You're gonna work on the feedback after the testing is done by the client. So the fourth stage will be what? Your customer feedback. So in this case, customer feedback is also, you can say that that is a core driving focus. You can say the customer feedback or the approval is our core driving focus for this prototyping model. That's why we are spending some extra time in order to make them understand. So the feedback should be collected in a documented systematically and analyzed by the development team in order to avoid any further confusion. So the documentation over here is very mandatory. So example, your user may suggest like new feature addition, modification to the existing system or the screen designing, or the colors, so simplification of any complex operation. So this feedback will ensure what? It will ensure the system evolve based on the actual user need rather than the assumption. So here what is happening at this fourth stage, rather than the assumption, we are moving into what is the actual need of the user. So once everything is done, so the last working stage will symbolize what? You revise, and obviously you have to enhance the prototype after collecting all the feedback, right? So in this case, what happening? So based on your customer feedback, the prototype is revised and enhanced. During this phase, what will happen? Your discussion and negotiation takes place considering the factor such as your time constraint, budget limitation, technical feasibility. So once, what I mean to say is once client understood what actually they want through your prototyping model. So what client is going to do now? So the client is going to talk about their further changes. Once the further changes is done, so you have to, as a developer, as a team lead, you have to explain the client how much time their requirement is going to take based on this prototyping model and what will be the budget limitation. So what could be your feasibility regarding your technicality. So all this to be discussed in this after revising your prototyping model. So only feasible and agreed upon changes are incorporated into the next vision or the version of the prototype. The revised prototype is then again presented to the customer, and cycle keep on continuing until the expectation are fully met. So till then you have to keep on doing it. So these are the particular working types, or you can say working phases of your prototyping model. So this working phase I have divided into 5 types. You can see requirement, then you're developing. In the developing, obviously your design come, then prototyping come. So here what you are going to do, you are going to do the prototyping, then customer evaluation, review and refine. So this cycle is a continuous cycle here, but this two stage comes after the customer approve. So how the customer approve? Customer approve after development of the initial prototype, then they do the testing by themselves, then they give a feedback. So once this has been released, so what happened? The cycle again continues. So the cycle continues till till the revised model is been finalized. Once it is finalized, it will come to the stop. Otherwise, the cycle will keep on repeating. Why? You are going to review it, you are going to further refine it. So this is how a prototyping software prototyping model works on. So when we discuss about the software prototyping model, your software prototyping model is also further divided into 4 types. So there are your rapid, evolutionary, incremental, and your extreme prototyping. So now what is the basic difference between them? So there is no major difference, but what kind of work or the client you are dealing with, or what work you are going to carry out, depends on this prototyping types. So the first prototyping model or the type is rapid, or also known as a throwaway prototyping. So from the name itself, we can assume that what it's going to be. So throughout prototyping will involves a quickly building a simplified version of your software, often using like your sketches, your wireframes, or your basic interactive mockups to explore the ideas and gather feedback. So once there is done, that is done. So there is an understanding in a team that this prototype are not meant to be a part of the final product, and it will discarded once the proposal is served. It's just like while the client is discussing something, you are sketching out what the model will be, and you are just giving them a rough, you can say, the design in fraction of some time in that particular type. So here your team should have a particular understanding. So what? But this they should also know that what particular understanding, this is not going to be a final product, not final product. So in this, what will happen? In this way, it is ideal for initial stakeholder presentation, right? So the customer will discover different phases or any internal alignment when the product concepts are still forming. So you can say, however, it may be too simplistic, but it also serve a in-depth validation to them. Right. So this focus is also on quickly building or developing a prototype with very minimal effort at that present moment while you are discussing with the customer. So once the requirement are understood, the prototype is actually discarded, and then you go for the actual system to develop from the scratch. So this is what your first software type talks about, throwaway prototype. That means it's just for basic understanding or quick sketching of the model, what client requirement is. If client gives okay, good, you're good to go, or your thumbs up, then you move for the actual sketching. So what happened? The next kind of prototyping is a evolutionary prototyping. So obviously, the word itself suggests is evolutionary. Suggests means it will be evolving throughout the time. So that means what is happened in this approach, uh, where we will be working on a prototype which is developed at first, Then what will happen? Then continuously improve through multiple interaction. That means what? If you recall the cycle I was talking, it will repeat itself again and again. So one customer give the feedback, again it will review and refine, again rebuild the design, again go for the prototyping, then again customer evaluation. So like this evolutionary prototyping is been worked on. So in the prototype is not actually discarded. Instead, it gradually evolved into the final software product, you can say. So here user feedback actually plays a very key role in the process. So how it helps the developer to add new features, refine existing one. Obviously, this method is ideal for project, right? With changing or unclear requirement, especially in agile or lean environments. So this kind of environments, what happen when a customer is very unclear? So obviously they will keep on rotating their ideas, keep on asking you to move on to the next and change. So during that time, what happened? This evolutionary prototype, we try to make it. So it's not a fixed one, but we keep on evolving it or keep on changing it till we achieve a refined data. So here, however, what will happen is careful planning and any kind of version control are necessary, as poorly managed interaction can lead to technical or code debt. So what happening over here? Though this we keep on doing the refinement, but think how many time you want to go through the work and how many time you are going to refine the product. One time, two time is okay, but multiple time you're working on just a prototype, not only cost you time but also cost money, because time always works with the money, right? So obviously it can lead to any technical or as well as a code depth, a level of misunderstanding. So in this approach, you remember the prototype will gradually refine and evolve into the final system, well understood requirement and implemented first, then we move to new requirement and add it and keep on adding once they become clear. So that's what your evolutionary prototyping talks about. So here you have to be very careful. Then we come across with the third prototyping, which is also known as your incremental prototyping. So incremental, you can say, is an approach where the software is developed in a separate parts or modules. Okay, here what is happening? Parts or modules. This one was evolving time. So incremental prototyping, here we focus on any particular parts or module. So each prototype represents a specific feature of the system. So this prototype are either developed, tested and refined independently, and later it has been integrated to form the complete system. So initially what happened, we are working on the just the basic structure or the architecture of the model, but now we are going to talk about any particular part of the module where we are implementing more functionality and how it has been developed, tested and refined. We are going to focus on that. So in this approach, what is happening, especially it is only suitable for large scale or enterprise application. Always remember this third and fourth. This one will particularly talks about, it depends on what large scale or enterprise level of application, not for a small system. So where different team can work in parallel on modules such as your user interface, your admin panel or a backend service. It supports scalable development and stage releases. Also your easier for it is also easier for your testing. So here what is happening actually is, however, there is a proper coordination is essential between the teammates, but as any kind of poor integration or planning could also lead to inconsistency between the model, that we have to keep in mind. Any kind of misunderstanding or miscommunication between the team members can entirely destroy this particular function part of the module. So because one, though each module is been developed separately, but when you integrate it as a one project, at that time all modules should support each other, not disgrade each other. So what happen if there is a no proper communication? If any poor integration is there, then all the entire system will fall down. So in this case we have to be very careful. Okay, so then we move to the extreme prototyping. So this is a very serious type of prototyping. Here you are not going to play around, not going to do any rough. So rather it is what? It is a specialized approach mainly used in web application development. So I will write it down here. It is mainly used for what? Web application development. So why particularly application development is it requires your strong focus on your user interface, also your user experience before implementing the backend logic. Okay, so in the first page, what will happen? The developer will create a static web page using HTML or your design mockups to define any kind of layer or structure. So in the second page or second phase, you are going to do what? These pages are made interactive, obviously, you're stimulating user action with any hard-coded data or any dummy data, depending on the requirement or your while you are testing. So once the functionality has been achieved, what we are going to do? We will move to the final phase where the approved interface is connected to the real database, APIs connection, your backend services. So here turning the prototype into a final functional product. So the extreme prototype is very carefully done because it talks about the first page. You can say the first phase include what? Your, for your understanding, I'm saying like a static web page which will include your UI design, your colors, your how the buttons and bullets will appear. Then your second phase will deal with what? Your interactiveness between each pages, each functionality, each module. Then third and final stage talks about what? Real database connection. So real database connection means you are going to include your APIs, backend services and make it a final product. So this approach helps us front end as well as the backend mismatches and improve the usability through your early UI decision that may require adjustment later. So these are all about your four types of software prototypes. So from this software prototyping module and the working also from the types, we understood that what why actually we need a prototyping model. So there should be certain advantage and disadvantage, right? So prototyping model requires a lot of things. So let's first talk about the advantages. Till now, whatever we discuss, we try to find out what could be the possible advantages out of it. So we keep on discussing that this prototype is saving our time also. It is making the user to understand. So what actually needed? I told you one major thing in the software prototyping is what? Customer feedback. This is one of the major factor that entire prototyping model revolves around. That is your customer feedback. So what your first advantage, possible advantages will be your how high user involvement from early stages itself. Okay. So once the user is actively involved in his own product, then there are very less chances of having any kind of errors or any kind of miscommunication between the client as well as the developer, and hence your time, money, everything saves. So here user involvement is very high. Then what will happen if the user involvement is very high? Obviously, if the user involvement is very high, you will have a better understanding, right? So the better understanding of the system requirement, not only you but your user who are your client will also have a better understanding how they want their product to look like, what their product should consist of. Obviously, the better understanding, then this better understanding will lead you how it will lead you to early detect or early detection of any kind of defects or error, you can say, right? So once your errors or any kind of defects are made, what you are going to do? You are obviously going to reduce the development cost and time, right? Initial stage itself, when the client is talking about the requirement, you are going to this prototyping software prototyping model using, means you are understanding the mm, necessity. When the requirement you are understanding and the necessity you are understanding, and through the client feedback you are refining it, it is obviously reducing your errors or the defect rate. That means what? You can reduce your it helps the client to have reduce the development cost and time, which is also helpful for you. So once it has been done, reduce means what will happen? You will have a faster and more accurate model through your feedback, right? So you can say faster and more accurate feedback the client could give you after that. Then once it has been done, then what will happen? So last stage, last advantage is, as the developer perspective, what it will be, that identification of any missing or confusing functionality, identification of any missing or confusing functionality. So these are the basic advantages we can retrieve or derive from the topic what we discussed earlier now currently. So these are the six major advantage you can derive from it. So, so first one is what? High user involvement from the early stages. Then how better understanding about your system requirement. Then early detection of the defect. Then it reduce the development cost and time, so you can be more, the customer can be or the client can be more accurate on their feedback, and hence it will also helps you to identify any kind of missing or confusing functionality. So these are the things in terms of advantage we talk about. So now obviously when we are talking about the advantage, we have to also discuss about your disadvantages, right? Everything comes in hand, right? So let's just talk about your disadvantages. So the first, means I can say, despite of having this many advantage, the model always had some limitation. That is what? The first and the major thing will be your over dependency. Okay. So you can mention like over dependence on prototype may weaken your requirement analysis. That means what is happening while you are doing the documentation, the you may get confused. So over dependency, what is happening, keep on changing means lead to certain confusion. So hence what will happen? So the user may confuse the prototype with the final system. because multiple time they are giving feedback, multiple time we are showing them the prototype, so they may get confused with the final system, like they may consider this as to be a final system. So when you deliver them final system in a different version, different way, that's when the conflict arises. So that has to be clear. Then, so in this way, what it leads to, it leads to your scope creep, which may increase your system complexity. Then after that, what will happen? It will lead to that. It will lead to your developer may reuse unsuitable prototype codes, right? Because again and again you are doing the documentation. Again and again you are overfilling the requirement of the client. So it will obviously create a confusion between the developer. So developer may reuse any unsuitable prototype code out of confusion. Then what extra it could be? Also, you can talk about like there will be excessive prototyping, which may increase your development effort. Like when you are spending that and the client is very confusing what they want and they kept on changing their idea. So in this way, prototyping model will fail, because prototyping is just a rough assumption how it will look like a rough assumption, so that the client will have a basic clear requirement analysis. But if too much time they keep on changing, means what will happen? It is costing you a time, which is also costing you money. So it will also, what, excessive prototyping may increase development effort. So same thing, a person cannot stick to it and work on it, right? So hence development efforts also increases. So from this, what we understood, though your software prototyping model is very ideal for interaction, which act as a main interaction between the client as well as the your customer as well as the developer, but still it has some limitation. But if it is done in a proper way by following the working protocol, then definitely you can achieve it. And depending on what type or what is the criteria of the software prototyping needed, you have to divide the prototyping into 4 types and work on it accordingly. So hence you will derive this kind of advantages, also your disadvantages. So at the end, what we got from this topic is your software prototyping model is though highly effective when the requirements are unclear or expected to change. But what is happening, by actively involving user and incorporating their feedback early, though it helps to build your system to truly meet their expectation, but what happened, the proper control and discipline are essentially been misused by them, and hence in that way what happened, you suffer from your increasing in development efforts. And also you can also what happened, you are very unlikely to prevent any kind of misuse of this prototype. So hence, no, software prototyping is needed in highly contrast, but if it is a more complex software, so you may skip this more software prototyping model. So that's it for all for today. So thanks for listening. This is Adyasha signing off for today. Thank you.